Okay, let's jump right in. There's been some really significant movement in the U.S. Senate recently regarding stablecoins.
That's right. A key procedural vote on a stablecoin bill, the one they're calling the Genius Act, it actually passed.
Yeah, I saw the vote count 66 to 32. That's quite a margin.
It is, and what's particularly interesting is the bipartisan nature of that vote.
Definitely. 16 Democrats crossing the aisle to vote with Republicans. That caught my eye.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle here, showing some momentum, but, it's not the whole story.
How so?
Well, beneath that bipartisan surface, there are some pretty deep tensions, especially within the Democratic Party itself, about this specific bill.
That makes sense. And we should probably mention, if you're following this space, that a similar bill already got through the House Financial Services Committee.
Exactly. So you put those two things together, and it starts to look like something could actually land on President Trump's desk.
Which is fascinating timing, considering President Trump's own, shall we say, active interest in digital assets and stablecoins lately.
hmm His support is undoubtedly a major factor shaping this whole debate. It's something we definitely need to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Maybe this is a good time. If you're finding this topic interesting, just hit that like and subscribe button. We'll be covering these developments as they happen.
Good point.
So, okay, let's dig into the Genius Act itself. What's it actually trying to do? What are the core goals here?
Fundamentally, it's about creating the first real comprehensive federal rulebook for stablecoins in the U.S.
Trying to bring some order to the Wild West, as some people put it.
That's the narrative, yes.
Yeah.
Moving it towards a more regulated environment. The key areas it tackles are things like reserve requirements.
Meaning the companies issuing these stablecoins have to actually hold assets to back them up.
Precisely. Making sure the reserves are sufficient and verifiable. Then there's anti-money laundering, AML compliance.
Standard stuff for financial services, trying to bring crypto into that fold.
Right. And consumer protections are a big piece, too, trying to make sure users are safe. Plus, oversight for foreign issuers. That's becoming increasingly relevant.
Given how global crypto is, yeah, that seems necessary.
Mm.
I also read something about potential restrictions on big tech companies, like stopping them from just launching their own stablecoins.
Yes, that's definitely in there. It doesn't outright ban them, but it does put mechanisms in place for potential restrictions. It gives some discretion to a committee involving Treasury, the Fed, the FDIC.
Okay, so adding some guardrails there. Now, despite this progress, you mentioned the Democratic divisions. Let's talk about those concerns. What's driving the opposition from some Democrats?
Well, you might recall there was actually a previous procedural vote on something similar that failed, partly due to these concerns. A major one revolves around President Trump's own involvement in crypto.
You mean the USD1 stablecoin
Yeah.
and that meme coin associated with it?
Exactly. The worry is about potential conflicts of interest. Could the president personally profit financially if this bill passes? Could he, essentially end up regulating his own currency?
That sounds, well, like a significant ethical red flag for some lawmakers.
It certainly is. Critics, like Senator Elizabeth Warren, have been very vocal about the potential for unchecked corruption, national security risks, even financial instability if those conflicts aren't addressed properly.
Serious allegations, and yet we saw those 16 Democrats vote yes anyway. What's the thinking there? Why support it, despite those concerns?
For those Democrats, it seems to boil down to a belief that some regulation is better than none. They argue that the crypto space needs federal guardrails, to protect consumers and support responsible innovation.
So a pragmatic approach, weighing the risks.
Kind of. Senator Mark Warner, for example, acknowledged the red flags around the Trump family's involvement, but basically argued that ignoring the technology won't make the risks go away. He sees the bill as providing some much-needed oversight, even if it's not perfect.
Interesting calculation. Okay, what about the Republicans? Was it just unanimous support on their side?
Mostly strong support, yes. They largely see this as a positive step legitimizing the industry, providing the clarity crypto companies have been asking for.
Which the industry has wanted for years, right?
So years. But it wasn't completely unified. You had some opposition from the more libertarian wing.
Like Rand Paul, maybe. People wary of federal overreach.
Exactly. Lawmakers like Paul and Jerry Moran voted against it, generally resisting federal control over technologies they view as decentralized. It taps into that classic debate about financial freedom versus regulation.
Right, the philosophical divide. So flipping to the industry itself, how are crypto companies reacting to this Senate vote?
Overwhelmingly positive, I'd say. They see this as a major win. Regulatory clarity has been the big ask for so long.
Because it unlocks the door for more mainstream adoption and investment.
That's the hope. Clear rules could make traditional financial institutions, Wall Street types, much more comfortable entering the space.
And we're talking potentially billions of dollars.
That's the expectation, yes. Billions in institutional capital that's been sitting on the sidelines could potentially flow in if this framework becomes law.
Which, again, brings us back to President Trump. His push for this seems quite central.
It really does. His administration has clearly advocated for this bill, and his general pro-crypto stance helps create a favorable climate for it. But, as we discussed, that's a double-edged sword.
Because it fuels those concerns that the legislation might end up cementing his influence over the industry's future.
Precisely. It adds another layer to the debate. It feels like this vote wasn't just about the technicalities of stablecoins.
But also about power and influence in this new financial era.
Exactly. One analysis called it the currency of power, suggesting the vote was as much about Trump's role as it was about digital currency itself.
Okay, this is getting complex. Maybe we should just quickly recap what stablecoins are for anyone needing a refresher and why regulating them now is such a focus.
Good idea. So at the most basic level, stablecoins are cryptocurrencies, but they're designed to hold a stable value. Usually they're pegged to something like the US dollar.
So, trying to offer the benefits of crypto fast transactions, global reach, but without the wild price swings you see with Bitcoin or Ether.
That's the core idea, bridging traditional stability with blockchain efficiency. And there are different types, right?
Yeah, can you break those down?
Sure. The most common are fiat-backed, like USDC or Tether's USDT. They're supposed to hold actual dollars or equivalent assets in reserve.
It's supposed to be in the key phrase sometimes.
Well, that's where regulation comes in. Then you have crypto-backed ones, like DAI, which use other crypto assets as collateral, usually more collateral than the value of the stablecoin to handle volatility.
A bit more complex.
And finally, algorithmic stablecoins. These try to maintain their peg using code, adjusting supply and demand. But we saw with Terra USD how risky that model can be.
Right. The spectacular collapse of Terra definitely put a spotlight on the risks there. Okay, so assuming they do stay stable, what are the big upsides? Why are people excited about them?
Oh, there are quite a few potential benefits. Price stability is the obvious one, useful for payments, trading, just holding value in the crypto ecosystem. Transactions can be fast and cheap, especially cross-border.
Cheaper than traditional remittance services, potentially.
Potentially, yes. They operate 24/7, unlike banks. They're also fundamental building blocks for DeFi, decentralized finance.
Right, you need stable assets for lending, borrowing, all that.
Exactly. They can also promote financial inclusion, giving people in countries with unstable currencies access to something like a digital dollar. Plus, they're programmable via smart contracts, opening up cool possibilities, and traders use them constantly to hedge risk.
Okay, quite a list. But what about the downsides? We touched on the Terra collapse. What are the other main concerns?
Well, with fiat-backed ones, there's centralization risk. You're trusting the issuer to actually manage those reserves properly.
And transparency concerns, are the reserves really there? Are they audited?
Big questions, absolutely. Regulatory uncertainty is still a major issue globally, which this bill aims to address domestically. Smart contract vulnerabilities are a risk, especially for the crypto-backed and algorithmic types.
And the depegging risk. The chance they lose their dollar value is always there, isn't it?
It's the fundamental risk, yes. And finally, compared to something like Bitcoin, they don't really offer much potential for price appreciation. Their value is instability and utility.
Okay, so it's a trade-off. Where are we actually seeing them used in the real world right now?
All over the crypto ecosystem primarily. They're the main trading pairs on exchanges. Cross-border payments are a growing use case. People earn yield on them in DeFi protocols or centralized platforms.
Like a high-yield savings account almost.
Sort of, yeah, but with different risks, obviously. We're also seeing some use in on-chain payroll. Merchant payments are slowly growing. They're used as collateral in DeFi lending, and even in the NFT and Web3 space for buying and selling assets.
So their use cases are definitely expanding beyond just trading. Okay, bring it back to the Genius Act. The Senate passed the procedural vote. What happens next?
It heads over to the House of Representatives, which is currently held by the GOP.
And given that a similar bill already passed a key House committee and President Trump supports it, could it move quickly there?
It certainly could. The path might be smoother in the House compared to the Senate, where those Democratic divisions were more pronounced.
But it's not a done deal yet.
No, definitely not. Even if the House passes its version quickly, the House and Senate versions will likely have differences. They'll need to reconcile those into one final bill.
Through a conference committee or some negotiation process.
Exactly. Only after both chambers agree on the exact same text can it go to President Trump for his signature to become law.
Okay, so still a few steps to go. Wrapping things up then, we've seen this key Senate vote on the Genius Act, highlighting both bipartisan movement and significant divisions.
Yeah, it really throws the complexity of regulating stablecoins into sharp relief. There's clear momentum for a federal framework, but huge questions remain about getting it right, consumer protection, financial stability.
And the whole political dimension, especially with President Trump's direct involvement in the industry.
Absolutely. It forces you to think about that balance. How do you foster innovation in something like digital assets while also putting up necessary guardrails?
It's the central challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, if this regulation does come into effect, what are the real long-term impacts going to be for finance, for crypto adoption?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, really. It could significantly reshape the financial landscape. Definitely something to watch closely.
We certainly will be. Thanks so much for breaking all that down. And again, for everyone listening, if you found this valuable, please do like and subscribe. It helps us keep bringing you these analyses.
My pleasure. We really try to offer clear insights on these complex topics.
And thank you all for joining us today. We hope this gave you a clearer picture of where things stand with stablecoin regulation in the U.S. We'll catch you next time.